Prices for GT3 RSs and GT2 RSs have been flat during the last year, while prices for some McLarens and Ferraris have been falling. If you're lucky enough to shop in this segment of the market and care about values, the GT RS products should be on your list. However, there's also an important downside to this low depreciation rate that we'll talk about later in the video. All the way at the end I'll also address some questions about the upcoming EU market videos. But let's dive into the data now. We'll first have a look at the GT3 RS market. Starting with the 991 generation, we can see a big surge during the pandemic, a drop in the second half of 2022 and a stabilization during 2023. This pattern is akin to what we've seen in low depreciation markets like the 991 GT3. Zooming into last year, we can see that .2 prices came down by 2% or $5,000 and .1 prices by 0.4% or $900. And the latter change is not statistically confirmed, meaning that it's likely to be the result of chance. Furthermore, it might be interesting to some of you to hear that there's no real difference between the cars with and without the WISAC pack. Finally then, it's important to mention that all of these numbers are before any inflation adjustment. Switching to the 997 generation, split by the .1s and .2s and the 4-liter and normal .2s, we can see a flat development in the .1s and normal .2s. Prices didn't change significantly during the last 2 years. Yet, in the 4-liter market, we can see a big drop during 2022. But this drop is accompanied by a wide confidence interval. The price uncertainty in all these markets is high, as supply is low. So we also need to complement the numbers that we are about to see with auction data. The numbers over here, which are listing prices, show a 19% or $38,000 increase in the .1s, a 13.2% or $40,000 increase in the .2s, and a 0.3% or $2,000 increase in the 4-liter market. Auction data for the .1s displays a 5% increase, a 10% increase for the .2s, and minus 1% for the 4 liters. Looking at the change in the market composition for the .1s, the auction data is definitely more accurate over here. For the other two models the results are aligned, so let's average them and use those numbers later in the video. And that brings us to the latest generation, the 992. This car is brand spanking new, and that makes the numbers a bit tricky to analyze. Looking at the listings, prices are down by 4.3% compared to 3 months ago. But again, supply is limited over here. Looking at some auction results that are gathered by Classic.com, we can see that the most recent 4 cars went for $400,000 to $430,000, while the ones in October went for $460,000 to $470,000. Overall, I think it's fair to say that prices softened marginally, but it's difficult to attach a percentage decrease to this. Of course I will continue to update this trend. As supply grows, it will become more and more reliable. So subscribe if you want to see how this develops. And that brings us to the GT2 RS. The 991 generation dropped a bit in the second half of 2022. This is a development that we can see in virtually all markets. Since January 2003 though, values stabilized. This is the same as in the GT3 RS and GT3 market. Compared to last year, we're looking at a change of plus 1.3% or $4,700. There is however something special going on in the GT2 RS market. Prices for a few cars increased while they were still owned by the seller. And this is something that we saw during the pandemic but completely disappeared after mid-2022. It indicates that sellers are under the impression that their car is in high demand and consequently increase their price. More about that later. Supply for the 997 GT2 RS is extremely low, so we'll skip them and have a look at everything that we discussed so far. Over here I plotted the depreciation or appreciation rates during last year for the GT3 RS and GT2 RS, and this shows that the average increase was 2.5%. You can see that this is mainly driven by the 997 generation. Interestingly, we also saw in last week's GT3 market update that it was the 997 for which values increased the most. Seeing the same in the GT3 RS market reinforces the view that this generation is doing well. The only other car that increased in value is the 991 GT2 RS. The 4 liters and 991.1 GT3 RSs were flat and 991.2 GT3 RSs decreased slightly. Now as you probably guessed from the video title, this is an excellent result. Many other cars, especially the modern stuff, lost a lot more. So let's make a comparison to these other cars. Over here we have the US year-over-year price changes for almost all cars that feature on my channel. On the horizontal axis we have the price change compared to last year in percentages. And on the vertical axis we have the number of cars to which this change applies. Now the average decrease during last year was 8%, and most cars lost between 13 and 4%. Plotting the GT3 RS and GT2 RSs in here, it's evident that they outperformed the market. All cars fall in the top 25% of the cars that lost the least or even increased. The 997 GT3 RS increase is even among the largest one. Now perhaps this isn't such a surprising result. GT products are after all known for their low depreciation rate. What might be surprising though is that they also lost considerably less than other similar cars. For example, 600 LTs lost 7.8%, 720Ss 9.2%, Hurricane STO 16.2%, Performantes 5.2%, F8 Tributo 7.9%, 488s 8.7%, and 488 Pistas 1.5%. So this reveals that only the Pistas were as stable as the GT3 RSs, but that none matched the GT2 RSs. So if you factor in the current price level and the age, there aren't many cars, or perhaps even none, that come close to a GT3 RS or GT2 RS when it comes to depreciation. Now nobody can guarantee that this will hold in the future, we can only speculate about this. Yet, also when we dig a little bit deeper into the data, we cannot find any signs of a significant price weakness. Over here we have the development in the carried over inventory, that is, cars that didn't sell within 3 months. If this number increases, cars are spending more and more time on dealer lots, signifying a decrease in the scarcity level, something that puts downward pressure on the prices. If the number decreases, cars sell quicker, something that puts upward pressure on prices. And it is the latter development that happened in the second half of 2022. The share of unsold inventory increased, cars were selling slower, and prices declined. This increase is visible in almost the complete market. During 2023 though, we can see that the rates decreased. In January, 35% of the 991 GT2 RSs that were for sale were also for sale 3 months ago. For the GT3 RSs this was only 18%, a number that is similar to what we saw in the popular 992 GT3 market. All in all, this shows that these cars aren't hanging around, keeping prices high. They sell relatively quickly. In fact, if we look at the price changes for unsold cars, we can see that they are small or even positive. Starting with the GT3 RS, we can see that unsold cars are discounted by 5%, and this is 1% more than last year. Now if there's any price weakness visible in the data, this is it. But to be honest, I'm not attaching too much importance to it. Price changes for unsold inventory have a high seasonal component, so I'm expecting this line to increase in the next months. If it continues to point down, we're definitely looking at an increase in downward price risk. The GT2 RS is a special case. We can see the same seasonality, but the trend is upwards, meaning that cars that aren't sold within 3 months are increased in price. And this dynamic we saw a lot during the pandemic and typically signifies an extremely strong market. Of course, this is only one data point, so we need to be a bit careful with the interpretation here. However, it confirms that there is nothing in the data that points towards an increase in the downward price risk. Let's quickly summarize what we saw so far. GT3 RSs and GT2 RSs lost significantly less than the market average, less than other supercars, and it seems unlikely that prices will plummet anytime soon. All of this must sound pretty great if you're in the market for one, right? However, there's one important thing to consider if you care about values. That is, how much are you going to drive it? All of these numbers are based on the average mileage increase for the GT3 RSs and GT2 RSs. For the GT3 RS this was 1200 miles, and for the GT2 RSs this was close to 0 miles. So if you drive more than this, you should expect a higher depreciation rate. Let's have a look at some data. Over here we have the mileage sensitivity for the 991 GT3 RS and GT2 RS. And this reveals that the .1 GT3 RS loses 0.52% per 1000 miles driven, the Dot 2 0.92% and the GT2 RS 0.7%. Relating this back to the median price, we are looking at $1.3, $3.7 and $1.5,000. Obviously these are averages, so a high mileage car has a slightly lower mileage sensitivity than a low mileage car. But to be fair, these are excellent results for such an exotic car. Dot 1 GT3 RSs are approximately 7 years old. With a depreciation per 1000 miles of 0.52%, they score slightly better than the average of 0.56% for cars between 6 and 10 years old. Dot 2 GT3 RSs lost 0.92% per 1000 miles driven, and this is a bit higher than the average of 0.65% for cars between 3 and 6 years old. GT2 RSs sit approximately at the same level at 0.7%. Now if you want to know the mileage sensitivity for other cars, I recommend that you check out this video over here. Let's wrap up and conclude. GT3 RSs and GT2 RSs depreciated only marginally during last year, and in some cases even appreciated. They hereby outperformed the market. So if you are in the fortunate situation that you can shop in this price range and care about values, I would definitely shortlist these cars. It of course doesn't guarantee that prices won't come down in the future. After all, these cars are still fairly new. But so far we haven't seen a situation in which they decrease significantly more than the market. Now all of this applies to the US market. But under last week's video, some of you asked when the EU market videos will come. A fair question, because I have been talking about them for some time. I'm then also happy to share that you should see them appear on the channel by the end of March. The next GT3, R8, M2, M4 and McLaren videos will contain numbers for the German market as well. There will also be a special about the British EMEA market. Now increasing the number of countries means that it takes more time for me to make a video. Therefore, not every single video will include all countries. This YouTube channel is still a hobby, so I'll implement it first for the most popular markets and then reassess to see how it works. In parallel, I'm also expanding the number of cars for which I'm tracking the prices. The Lamborghini market and more low-end models, for example, received relatively little attention on the channel. Also, that's something that I'm working on. And with that we arrived at the end of this video. As always, thank you for watching and I hope to see you next week for a new video.